Captain Rodriguez, we need you in first class, right now. The female voice came over the intercom, shaky and urgent, as if the speaker had just witnessed something unbelievable. The entire cabin, 147 passengers, looked up in unison. The rustle of newspapers, the tapping of keyboards, and the laughter of children vanished at once. No one knew what was happening, but everyone could feel it. Something was very wrong in first class. In seat 2 amperes, a black man in a gray suit remained still. No panic, no rush, just calm composure, as if he had been waiting for this moment. His name was Johnson. On his wrist, a Patek Philippe glimmered beneath the overhead lights, each tick steady, precise, and cold. Flight attendant Jenkins stood before him, gripping the passenger manifest tightly. Her voice trembled, but she tried to hold on to authority. "Sir, I've asked you 3 times already. I need to see your original ticket." Johnson looked up. His eyes were as calm as still water, no fear, no irritation. He said nothing, offered no excuse. He simply slid his finger across his phone screen, where a message had just appeared. "Everything is ready, sir. Just give the signal." It felt as if all the air had been sucked from the cabin. A man in seat 1C whispered, "What's going on?" A couple in 2C quietly lifted their phones to record. Every gaze turned toward seat 2 amperes. "You're delaying the flight." Jenkins raised her voice, tension rising. "If you don't cooperate, I'll have to call the captain." Johnson leaned back in his seat, folded his arms, and smiled faintly, a smile no one could quite read. "You should do that." The words were soft, yet they sent a shiver through several passengers. A young woman in 4 amperes raised her phone and started a live stream. On her screen appeared the caption, "Drama in first class, Skylink 2847. Within a minute, thousands had tuned in. The cockpit door opened with a snap. Captain Rodriguez stepped out, broad-shouldered, gold bars gleaming on his epaulets. 23 years in aviation had taught him one thing: every crisis in the sky begins with a human problem. His eyes swept the scene, a panicked flight attendant, a passenger unnervingly calm, and dozens of cameras capturing every second. "Miss Jenkins, what's happening here?" "This man refuses to show identification," Jenkins said quickly. "He's been sitting in first class for over 20 minutes with no proof of purchase, and he doesn't look like he belongs here." The words sliced through the air like a blade. Rodriguez frowned. He looked at Johnson, upright posture, hands resting on his knees, eyes steady as if observing an experiment of his own design. No threat, no defiance. Yet his silence filled the cabin with unbearable tension. "Sir," Rodriguez said evenly, "I'm the captain. May I see your ticket?" "Please?" Johnson reached into his inner jacket pocket and handed it over. "Skylink Airlines, Flight 2847, Seat 2 amperes, Phoenix." Everything matched. The QR code shimmered under the light, perfectly authentic. "Looks valid," Rodriguez said. "It's fake," Jenkins cut in sharply. "Captain, look at him. Don't you see? He doesn't look like someone who sits here." The cabin thickened with unease. Some passengers shook their heads, others kept recording. Under the dim light, Johnson raised his eyes to meet Rodriguez's. "People like me aren't supposed to sit here, are we, Captain?" The question hit like a hammer. No one exhaled. Rodriguez said nothing. Jenkins's face flushed. She looked away. Johnson gave a faint, weary smile, his voice low and steady, like wind sweeping through the cabin. "It's all right, because after this flight, everyone here will learn a very expensive lesson." The final boarding, 10 minutes light blinked on the control panel. On the live stream, the viewer count skyrocketed, 8,000, 12,000, then 15,000. Comments flooded in. "Who is this guy?" "Something's not right. Feels like something big's about to happen." Outside, the runway lights burned bright. Inside, the plane seemed to hold its breath. A silent man waited. A rattled crew struggled for control. And thousands watched through their screens, unaware that, in just a few minutes, they would witness the most expensive flight in Skylink Airlines history. Because tonight, high above American skies, justice was about to learn how to fly. The first-class cabin of Skylink, 2847, had thickened into something like a courtroom in the sky. Captain Rodriguez stood in the aisle, one hand on his radio, eyes moving between Jenkins and Johnson. He could feel every tense breath in the confined space, like the entire plane was holding its air, waiting for a verdict. "Sir," he said, trying to keep his tone calm, "my crew reported that you refused to cooperate. I just need to confirm, are you certain this is your ticket?" Johnson replied softly, without blinking. "More certain than you're standing there, Captain." A quiet chuckle slipped from a seat behind him, dying quickly when Jenkins turned her head. She stepped forward, voice rising with each word. "Captain, can't you see? That ticket could be fake. People like him don't fly in this class. He might have bought it on the black market or hacked the system." The words hit like a spark tossed into a tank of silence. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. A woman in 3D whispered, "I paid nearly $1,000 for this seat. They should check properly." A man nodded, "Probably a scammer." Johnson tilted his head, his gaze at Jenkins calm to the point of chilling. "People like me, you said?" He enunciated every word, not loud, but enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Would you care to explain that? What kind of people are we, exactly?" Jenkins froze for a second. "I just meant people who dress. People I usually see sitting up here don't look like you." The faint crackle of the live stream phone filled the pause. The girl in 4 amperes had just changed the title. "They said he doesn't belong here." The viewer count surged past 20,000. Comments exploded across the screen. Did she really say that? In 2025? Seriously? "Keep the camera on, this is about to blow up." Cold sweat gathered on Rodriguez's neck. He hated confrontations like this, where one wrong sentence could ignite a PR disaster. He took a slow breath, trying to meditate. "Mr. Johnson, please understand, she's just doing her job. We have to verify passenger identities for security reasons." Johnson's gaze didn't waver. "I understand, but it seems she's not verifying every passenger, just the ones who look like me." Silence fell again. Jenkins swallowed hard. "I'm only following protocol." "What protocol?" Johnson asked, his tone dropping to a measured, deliberate calm, like a professor testing a student. "Which regulation says a black man in a suit can't sit in first class?" An invisible chill swept through the cabin. Rodriguez turned away, unable to meet Johnson's eyes. He realized he had no answer. "I didn't mean to discriminate," Jenkins stammered, her voice trembling now. I had a feeling, instinct, that's all." "No," Johnson said quietly, a smile that never reached his eyes. "That's not instinct, that's a habit. And that habit is about to cost you and this company more than you can imagine." Rodriguez's radio crackled. "Captain, 9 minutes until takeoff. Status?" He replied quickly, "Not resolved. May need ground intervention." Meanwhile, the live stream girl whispered, "Oh my God, 25,000 people are watching." A passenger in 1C lost patience. "Captain, please just remove him. Some of us have connections in Phoenix." A few voices murmured in agreement. Jenkins seized the moment. "You see? Everyone's uncomfortable with his presence." Johnson turned slowly to face the cabin. The light glinted off his eyes like polished steel. "Uncomfortable with what? That I'm sitting in the seat I paid for? Or that my existence makes you confront your own reflection?" No one spoke. Rodriguez exhaled. He knew he had to act, yet every move felt like stepping on a minefield. "Sir, I have to ask you to present additional identification, driver's license, credit card, anything that can verify you." Johnson nodded slowly. He unbuttoned his jacket. Rodriguez tensed instinctively, but Johnson simply took out a fine Italian leather wallet, opened it gently, and revealed a black card. The American Express Centurion. Jenkins stammered, Is that real?" Rodriguez glanced briefly, his heart sinking. "That card was only issued to those who spent millions of dollars a year." "You were right about one thing, Jenkins," Johnson said softly, sliding the wallet back into his pocket. "People like me rarely get seen in seats like this, but not because we can't afford them." He leaned in slightly. "Because we've grown used to being doubted." A wave of quiet rolled through the cabin. Jenkins froze. Rodriguez stood motionless, speechless. And somewhere, the young woman's phone kept streaming. The viewer count hit 32,000. Pinned at the top of the chat was a single comment. "Sometimes prejudice doesn't need to shout. It only needs a glance." Outside, The runway lights blinked, signaling readiness for takeoff. But inside Flight 2847, something else had already begun, a confrontation no one on board could control. The air inside Skylink Flight 2847 was so thick that even a whisper could have made someone cry. Captain Rodriguez felt a sweat bead along his temple. He had never encountered a situation so fragile, so dangerous, where every decision he made could turn into legal evidence within seconds. He lowered his voice. "Mr. Johnson, I understand your frustration, but under federal aviation regulations, if a passenger refuses to verify their identity when requested, we have the authority to ask them to deplane. Please cooperate just one more form of identification." Johnson looked up, his tone low and sharp, each word like a fine blade. "Captain, do you know what Section 91.1, one of the Federal Aviation Regulations, states?" Rodriguez froze. It was a clause only industry professionals would know, defining the crew's authority and the limits of their power over passengers. "I do," he said carefully. "But that clause concerns in-flight disturbances. It doesn't apply before takeoff." Johnson tilted his head slightly. "Exactly. And I haven't disturbed anyone except by sitting in the seat I paid for. So if you force me to leave, do you realize what you'd be violating?" "Are you threatening me?" Jenkins snapped. "No," Johnson replied calmly. "I'm asking if your captain understands the law." A ripple of whispers moved through the cabin. The girl in 4 amperes murmured into her live stream, "Oh my God, he's quoting the law now." The viewer count surged to 41,000. Comments poured in. "Is this guy a lawyer? Feels like the plot twist is coming. Don't stop recording." Rodriguez gripped his radio tighter. He knew every word he spoke could now be replayed, dissected, and possibly used against him. He opened his mouth to respond, but Johnson spoke first, his voice steady as the ticking of the watch on his wrist. "Captain, before you order me off this plane, just remember this cabin has at least 12 recording devices running right now. And under federal law, any discriminatory act aboard a commercial flight can qualify as a civil rights violation." Jenkins gave a short, bitter laugh. "So what? You're threatening to sue the entire airline?" Johnson smiled faintly. "No, Miss Jenkins, I'm not threatening. I'm simply describing what will happen if you continue." The intercom tone chimed overhead. 7 minutes until scheduled departure. Silence blanketed the cabin. Rodriguez felt his heart pounding against his ribs. He realized he wasn't dealing with a difficult passenger, he was holding a legal time bomb, ticking in his hands. "Captain," Jenkins whispered, "if you don't act, the passengers will think we're weak. You have to do something." Rodriguez inhaled deeply, nodded. "I'll call ground security." Johnson glanced at his watch. "Captain, before they arrive, just remember this. Everything from this moment is being recorded, and in 30 seconds, you'll receive a call that will change everything." Rodriguez frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Johnson only smiled. "You'll see." A red light blinked on the control panel. Security approaching gate. Someone in the cabin held their breath. The flight no longer felt like transportation. It had become a public tribunal in the sky, where everyone aboard was both witness and judge. Outside the window, the runway lights waited in silence. But everyone inside knew, before this plane ever left the ground, a storm was about to break. And it would begin with one call from Skylink Operations Command. The sound of a click echoed as the airplane door opened. The entire first-class cabin of Skylink 2847 froze. 2 airport security officers stepped in, one male, one female, dressed in black uniforms, radios on their shoulders, eyes sweeping the cabin like they were entering a crime scene. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The whispers, the phone vibrations, the live streams all collided into a chaotic wave. "Captain Rodriguez?" the female officer asked, her voice cool and firm. "We were informed there's a passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions." "That's correct," Jenkins replied quickly, almost cutting her off. "He's sitting in the wrong seat, refusing to cooperate, and acting threatening." Johnson remained seated in 2 amperes, hands resting calmly on his knees, his gaze steady, terrifyingly so. "I haven't threatened anyone," he said slowly. "I'm simply sitting in the seat I paid for." The male officer name tag reading Officer Kim took a step forward. "Sir, please present your ID and step off the aircraft voluntarily. Everything can be resolved outside." Johnson didn't move. I'm not going anywhere. I have a valid ticket. I'm not causing a disturbance. And if you try to force me, you'll be violating my civil rights. A jolt of electricity seemed to pass through the cabin. Cameras trembled. The live stream count shot past 63,000 viewers. Comments flooded in. Don't touch him. This is blatant discrimination. Tag CNN now. Rodriguez felt his palms go cold. He saw something in Johnson's eyes, not fear, but expectation, as if the man already knew exactly how this scene would unfold. Sir, Officer Kim said sternly, we don't want to use force, but if you refuse to comply, you could be charged with obstructing flight operations. That's a federal offense. Johnson tilted his head. In that case, before you act, let me ask, do you understand the concept of unlawful detention under federal law? The cabin went silent. The female officer frowned, hesitant. I'm sorry. What did you just say? Detaining a lawful passenger without just cause, Johnson said, his tone low and precise. That's a civil offense that could see every party involved, from the captain to the crew to security, held liable in court. Are you sure you want to go down that road? Rodriguez's heartbeat quickened. Jenkins's face turned red, her composure snapping. Enough. He's threatening us with legal terms now. Captain, give the order. Calm down, Jenkins, Rodriguez said quietly, though his voice betrayed his nerves. This entire situation is being recorded from every angle. I don't care, Jenkins almost screamed. He doesn't belong in this cabin, and I won't let him humiliate us. Johnson said nothing. He slowly turned his head, scanning the cabin. More than a dozen phones were pointed directly at him. At Jenkins, at the two uneasy officers. Then his voice rose clear, firm, unshaken. Did you all hear that? She said, I don't belong here, on an American airline. In 2025, remember this moment, record it all, because this will not be allowed to happen again. The cabin erupted in murmurs. The sound of live streams grew louder, like waves crashing against metal. Rodriguez bit his lip and pressed the radio button. Ops Center, this is Captain Rodriguez. We need immediate instruction. The situation is escalating. A triple beep sounded in his earpiece, followed by the urgent voice of Operations Command. Captain, hold your position. Skylink headquarters is monitoring the feed in real time. The incident has likely gone viral. A call from Operations Center is coming through, right now. A red light flashed on the control panel. Rodriguez looked at Johnson, still seated, as calm as a judge waiting for the verdict. And then, his phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. That call. It was the moment the world first heard about the storm known as Flight 2847. The phone in Captain Rodriguez's chest pocket vibrated violently. On the screen, Ops Center, urgent. He glanced toward Johnson. The man remained still, hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed straight ahead as if he already knew exactly who was calling and why. Rodriguez swallowed hard and answered, This is Captain Rodriguez. The voice on the other end came fast, clipped, breathless. Captain, this is Skylink Operations. Flight 2847 is being monitored live. Social media is exploding. Passenger footage has surpassed 42,000 live views in under 10 minutes. Do you copy? Copy, Rodriguez said hoarsely. We're trying to contain the situation. The passenger is non-compliant. Security is on site. The voice interrupted. No, Captain, you don't understand. The issue isn't the passenger anymore. It's the cameras. Every phone in that cabin is streaming live, and Skylink is now facing a level red media crisis. Rodriguez tightened his grip on the phone. What are headquarters' instructions? Maintain silence. No forced removal. Do not touch the passenger. We're verifying the man's identity. Identity? Yes. We have reason to believe he's not an ordinary passenger. Rodriguez's pulse quickened. He looked over at Johnson, still seated, unnervingly calm in the thick tension of the cabin. Who is he? We can't confirm yet. But if legal's assumption is correct, your entire crew should be extremely cautious. Behind him, Jenkins couldn't hold it in anymore. Her voice cracked. Captain, why are you listening to him? He's manipulating us. He's threatening lawsuits, filming us, intimidating everyone. Quiet, Jenkins. Rodriguez cut her off, eyes still locked on the phone. The Ops Center voice continued. Listen carefully, Captain. We're tracking social chatter. The hashtag number Skylink discrimination is trending in the top 5 nationwide. CNN, Fox, and even the FAA have reached out for comment. If you mishandle this, it'll become the worst PR disaster in Skylink history. I repeat, do not touch the passenger. And if he refuses to move, then leave him where he is. We'll call back once his identity is confirmed. But remember, everything is streaming live. You understand what happens if the wrong image circulates. Rodriguez glanced toward the cabin. Jenkins stood rigid, eyes red and trembling. The two security officers exchanged uneasy looks, waiting for orders. Tiny red lights from dozens of phones glowed like watchful eyes. Johnson tilted his head slightly, voice calm but resonant. "Ops center on the line, Captain?" Rodriguez said nothing, but Johnson continued. "They told you to stay quiet, didn't they? Too many people watching?" He smiled faintly. "Let's see. 46,000? No, 48. About to hit 50,000. Rodriguez turned away. "What do you want?" "It's not what I want," Johnson said, his voice low but unwavering. "It's what they want, the people watching. They want the truth. And you know the most ironic thing about civil rights cases, Captain? They all start with silence." Jenkins's voice cracked, nearly breaking into sobs. "Don't let him manipulate us like this!" Johnson turned toward her, not angry, just quietly, almost pitying. "I don't have to manipulate anyone, Miss Jenkins. You did that yourself. You said I don't belong here, remember? And tens of thousands of people just heard it." She froze. A passenger behind them whispered, "Did she really say that?" The live stream exploded again. The viewer count leapt past 60,000. Rodriguez's throat tightened. He lifted the phone, speaking quickly. "Ops Center, I need immediate ID confirmation for passenger 2 Amperes. The situation is escalating fast. We need action now." Silence. Then the manager's voice returned, measured, deliberate. Each word weighed. "Captain, maintain current position. But you should know, legal just flagged something. Passenger 2 Amperes may be listed among Skylink's internal VIP registry." Rodriguez froze. "What are you saying?" "We can't confirm yet, but if accurate, you're speaking to someone with very high authority inside the company." Every muscle in Rodriguez's body tensed. He turned to Johnson, who was now checking his watch, calm, precise, as if counting down. A soft ping echoed through the cabin. The live streamer's phone lit up. Viewer milestone reached, 75,000 watching live. Rodriguez's chest tightened. Everything was spinning out of control. Before he could respond, the voice from Ops Center returned steady, grave, almost echoing with his own heartbeat. "Captain, stay composed. The executive board is about to join. This next call comes from the highest governance level. They will assume direct command." The cabin lights shifted to amber, washing every tense face in a golden glow. And in that fragile silence, Johnson spoke just loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "This is the moment when systems expose their own flaws, Captain. Let's see what they choose to protect their image or the truth." Rodriguez's phone vibrated again. The screen flashed a new caller ID, Skylink Executive Boardroom, incoming call. The cabin went utterly still. No one moved. No one breathed. The storm had just reached its next layer. The call connected. A deep male voice came through the cockpit, speakers slow, steady, and heavy with authority. "This is Davidson, Executive Vice President of Skylink. Captain Rodriguez, we are monitoring Flight 2847 inches real-time. The passenger in Seat 2 Amperes, Mr. Johnson, is cleared to continue his journey. No one is to touch him. I repeat, no one is to touch him." Rodriguez froze. Jenkins's mouth fell open. "Sir, you mean he's cleared to continue, but he hasn't verified his identity?" Davidson's voice cut in cold, precise, leaving no room for argument. "Miss Jenkins, is it? I suggest you take a seat, and pray this video doesn't leave the internet within the next 24 hours. The cabin seemed to explode into silence. Every eye turned toward Johnson. The black man slowly rose from his seat. He wasn't tall, but the calm gravity around him bent the air itself. He reached under his seat, pulled out a sleek leather briefcase, opened it, and drew out a thick folder, then a single, silver-embossed business card. The cabin light caught the Skylink logo, gleaming like a seal of power. He stepped toward Rodriguez, voice calm and even. "Perhaps this will make things clearer, Captain." Rodriguez accepted the card. His hands trembled as he read the final line. "Nathaniel Johnson, chairman of the board, Skylink Airlines." The world seemed to collapse around him. Rodriguez felt as if the floor had vanished beneath his feet. Jenkins stumbled back, whispering, "No, that's impossible. The chairman doesn't fly commercial. He has his own jet." Johnson gave a faint, knowing smile. "I prefer to see how my passengers are treated when they don't have privilege written on their ticket." A soft ping sounded from the girl's phone in row 4 amperes. The viewer count leapt to 89,000. Comments flooded the feed. "He's the chairman! Oh my God, they just profiled the head of the airline. This is history record everything." Rodriguez stammered. "Sir, if you truly are," Johnson gently interrupted. "Not if, Captain. Am. And now, I want to see how Skylink Airlines responds when its own chairman is doubted simply because of the color of his skin." He turned, sat back down with measured calm. "Proceed with the flight, Captain. We have work to do in the sky today." Outside, the ready-for-takeoff light blinked to life. Inside, every gaze in the cabin stayed fixed on the man who had just turned a first-class compartment into a courtroom of justice. The cabin of Skylink Flight 2847 was silent as if the entire world had stopped breathing. The whispers were gone. Only the hum of the engines remained, blending with the heartbeat of 147 souls who now realized they had just witnessed something irreversible. Rodriguez still stood there, the business card trembling in his hand, the words, "Chairman of the Board," burning against his fingers. He tried to steady his voice. "Mr. Johnson, if I had known who you were, Johnson turned his head, eyes sharp but not angry. "Captain, what did you just say? If you had known?" He leaned forward slightly, each word precise and cutting. "So, if I weren't the chairman, if I were just another passenger, does that mean you would have treated me differently?" Rodriguez froze. The question struck straight to the heart, impossible to dodge. Behind him, Jenkins began to sob, but Johnson didn't turn. His voice stayed calm, level, almost haunting in its steadiness. "You asked if I could prove my identity." Jenkins said, "I don't belong here. The security officers tried to remove me. I paid for this seat. I had a valid ticket, a verified QR code, and yet I still had to prove I was worthy of sitting here. So let me ask again." He paused, then lifted his gaze toward the girl in 4 amperes' livestream camera, where the viewer count had just passed 100,000. "Why must I prove my worth for a place I already paid for with my own money?" The question landed like steel. A few passengers lowered their phones, shame flickering across their faces. A middle-aged man in 1C exhaled quietly, his expression caught between guilt and awakening. Johnson's eyes moved slowly across the cabin, taking in each face. "This isn't about me anymore. This is about everyone who's ever been judged simply because they don't look like what others believe is the right kind. You know, Captain, I once told the executive board that all it would take was one first-class cabin, one flight to see the true face of this industry. They didn't believe me. So today, I flew. No security detail, no private jet, no announcement. And look," he raised a hand toward the rows of phones still pointed at him. "They've just shown me everything I needed to see." Rodriguez bowed his head, voice trembling. "Sir, we were only following procedure." Johnson gave a small, weary smile, not mocking but deeply sad. "Procedure? The kind that makes people forget how to look one another in the eye? Forget to ask the one question that matters most. What if I'm wrong?" Silence engulfed the cabin again. Jenkins let out a broken sob, tears streaking down her face. Johnson turned toward her, voice soft but firm. "Miss Jenkins, if I were a white man wearing the same suit, the same watch, would you have called security?" No answer, only the sound of her stifled crying. Johnson leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Captain Rodriguez, I don't need an apology. I need a system that knows how to examine itself." He paused, eyes drifting toward the window where the crimson glow of sunset reflected off the wing. "Because sometimes, justice doesn't live in courtrooms, it lives in the moment someone finds the courage to admit, 'I was wrong.'" The live stream count kept climbing, 120,000 people watching. And in seat 2 amperes, the question of one man had just become a lesson for an entire industry. A soft ping echoed from Johnson's tablet. The screen lit up, casting a pale blue glow across his face. Every head in the cabin turned toward it. A live video window opened, revealing the Skylink Airlines executive boardroom, a long oak table, the company logo engraved on the wall behind it, and 6 stern figures seated in silence. The woman in the center nodded slightly. "Nathaniel, we're following the situation. Are you all right?" Rodriguez held his breath. The entire cabin did. It was Patricia Watkins, Senior Vice President of Global Operations, the kind of name that made every Skylink employee stand at attention. "I'm fine," Johnson said evenly, "but I think a few people here have some explaining to do." Jenkins broke down in tears. No, this can't be real. They're watching us?" Rodriguez's hands trembled as he stared at the screen, each executive in a dark suit, each one witnessing, live, every word and movement now being broadcast to hundreds of thousands of viewers. Patricia leaned toward the camera. "Captain Rodriguez, this is Watkins, Vice President of Skylink. Can you explain why our chairman was nearly forced off his own aircraft?" Rodriguez opened his mouth, voice faltering. "Ma'am, we didn't know. We had no idea he was—" "No need to know," another male voice interrupted, cold, resonant, unmistakably authoritative. "The issue isn't who he is. The issue is how you treated him when you thought he was nobody." The words hit like thunder. Johnson said nothing, his hands folded, his composure unbroken. Patricia turned toward Jenkins. "Your flight attendant, Jenkins?" Jenkins nodded weakly, tears streaking down her face. "Did you in fact say that Mr. Johnson doesn't belong here?" Jenkins lowered her head. No answer. Patricia faced the camera again, her tone low and heavy. "Good. Because now, the whole world has heard it. And that, Miss Jenkins, is what we call undeniable evidence." Rodriguez bowed his head. The soft whir of the engines now sounded like a verdict being delivered. Johnson looked around the cabin, then gently set the tablet on the tray table, tilting the screen so every passenger could see. 2 new faces joined the video, Jordan, the CEO, and Coleman, the company's chief legal officer. Jordan's voice was deep, deliberate. "Mr. Johnson, we offer our deepest apologies for what happened. Our system clearly has a problem." Johnson didn't turn. "No, Robert, we have a problem, not the system." "What do you mean?" "I mean, people create discrimination, not policies, not protocols. It's the gaze, the judgment, the fear, those are what force people like me to prove what should already be obvious." He paused, letting each word settle into the silence. "And now, with the whole country watching, I want us to start fixing it." Rodriguez could barely breathe. Jenkins covered her face with both hands. A passenger whispered, "This isn't a flight anymore. It's a courtroom." On the screen, Jordan nodded. "We're monitoring media coverage. The live stream has exceeded 160,000 live viewers. CNN, NBC, BBC, and Reuters have picked it up. We need a response strategy right now." Coleman spoke next, his tone tense. "We've activated Protocol 47B Crisis Management Procedure. All involved personnel are suspended pending review. And you, Nathaniel, do you want us to proceed with legal action?" Johnson smiled faintly. "No, I don't want firings or lawsuits. I want reform." "Reform?" Patricia repeated. He nodded. "I've prepared for this. For 6 months, I've had our legal division review 47 passenger discrimination complaints against Skylink. I know exactly where we failed, and I've already drafted a proposal to rebuild the entire system. But I needed a catalyst to prove it was real." He looked directly into the camera, his voice steady, firm. "And tonight, Miss Jenkins, Captain Rodriguez, and everyone on this flight, you became that test." Rodriguez stepped back slightly, as if the words had struck him in the chest. "A test?" "Yes, a test of character, perception, and culture, and you've just revealed where the real fault lies." Patricia tilted her head. "What will you do with this data, Nathaniel?" Johnson closed the tablet, his eyes deep and calm. "Stream it to the world and use it to rebuild the cultural foundation of Skylink." Jordan's voice came through one last time, steady, solemn. "We'll stand behind you completely, effective immediately. Flight 2847 will be recorded in company history as the beginning of the Zero Tolerance Initiative. A full press conference will follow tomorrow morning." The live stream count hit 180,000. Comments flooded in. "This is history." An airline reborn above the clouds. He just turned prejudice into reform. Johnson lifted his gaze, speaking softly but clearly enough for the cabin mic to capture every word. Today, I'm not seeking revenge. I'm seeking justice. And justice doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be right. A long silence followed. Rodriguez slowly sat down, eyes wet. His voice cracked. "Mr. Johnson, if there's anything I can do to make this right." Johnson turned toward him, his expression gentle now. "Start by listening, because only when we listen do we begin to understand." The cabin lights shifted from amber to soft blue, the signal for stable flight. But no one moved. Every eye remained fixed on the man in seat 2 amperes, the one who had just forced the largest airline in America to look in the mirror. Johnson reopened the tablet. The glow from the screen lit his face calm but cold. A graph appeared. Skylink's stock price was plunging in real time. "Captain Rodriguez," he said quietly, each word measured, "do you know what happens when an airline is accused of discrimination, live on air?" Rodriguez said nothing. Johnson swiped across the screen. Red numbers flashed. 7.3%, 9.1%, 11.4%. "That's Skylink's stock," he continued. "Down nearly $1 billion in the past 20 minutes. Global media are running emergency coverage. Legal is fielding over 300 complaints in the last 30 minutes. PR is paralyzed." The next slide showed a cascade of headlines. Skylink Airlines under fire for racial profiling on Flight 2847. Chairman exposes his own airline in viral livestream. Corporate reform or corporate ruin. Jenkins covered her mouth, her face drained of color. "Oh my God, this is really happening." Johnson looked at her not with anger, but with a weary calm. "No, Jenkins, this has always been happening. This time, it's just on camera." Rodriguez pressed a hand to his forehead. "Mr. Johnson, this could destroy the company." "No," Johnson replied softly. "It will save it if we have the courage to face the truth." He swiped again. The screen displayed an urgent message from the legal division. "FAA requesting incident report. Civil Rights Division notified." The red text blinked like a warning siren that would not shut off. Everyone in the cabin felt it. This was no longer a flight, it was a turning point in American aviation history. "Miss Jenkins," Johnson said, his voice deepening. "Within 1 hour, every pilot, every attendant, every employee in the Skylink network will be called in for retraining. But I need one thing from you right here, right now." She looked up, eyes trembling. "What do you want me to say?" "That you understand. That you know the mistake wasn't in the color of my skin, but in the lens you were taught to see through." Jenkins nodded, her voice breaking. I understand now." Johnson inclined his head. "Good, because now we're not talking about an incident. We're talking about a legacy." The cabin light softened, reflecting Johnson's silhouette against the window beyond it. The vast night sky stretched open, endless and still. A quiet symbol of the one thing that remained untouched. The truth. Johnson set the tablet down, his hands interlaced in front of him. No one in the cabin dared to speak. The dim golden light reflected across his face calm, composed, as if everything was unfolding exactly as planned. "Captain Rodriguez," he began slowly, "I'll say this only once. Today's flight was no coincidence. It was a test." Rodriguez looked up sharply. "A test?" Johnson nodded. "Yes. For the past 6 months, I've received dozens of reports about passengers being mistreated for being different. I told the board that unless we saw it ourselves, we'd never believe it. So I booked a ticket, no privilege, no notice. I wanted to see how our airline truly treats its passengers when no one's watching." A breath escaped from the back of the cabin. Jenkins clutched her seat. "And the result," Johnson raised his head, his voice so cold it didn't need volume, "is what you've all just witnessed." He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick, silver-trimmed document folder. "This is the comprehensive reform plan I've prepared, the Skylink Equality Framework. It includes 3 pillars: mandatory training, independent oversight, and a $10 million justice fund." The tablet screen lit up again, displaying clear bullet points. 1. Unconscious bias training mandatory for all 43,000 Skylink employees, from pilots to ground staff. 2. Transparency, oversight, All passenger complaints will go directly to an independent review council, bypassing internal management. SAN. Air Justice Fund, $10 million per year, dedicated to supporting victims of discrimination within the aviation industry. Jenkins lifted her tear-streaked face. Mr. Johnson, you prepared all of this beforehand? Johnson nodded gently. I didn't want another internal memo. I wanted proof. And today, you gave it to me not with words, but with actions. Rodriguez gripped the armrest of the co-pilot's chair. Sir, I understand, but must this go public? The company will take massive damage. Johnson tilted his head slightly. Damage, Captain? Or cleansing? A corporation can't soar with dirty wings. I'd rather lose $1 billion today than bow to justice tomorrow. He looked around the cabin, lowering his voice until it was nearly a whisper, yet it carried farther than any announcement system could. Miss Jenkins, I know you're not cruel. Captain Rodriguez, I know you're not evil. But both of you are products of a system that forgot something simple. Respect isn't written in procedure, it's carried in the eyes. The cabin fell utterly silent. A small child in the back asked softly, Mom, who is he? His mother pulled him close and whispered, He's the man making the whole world listen. Johnson continued, his tone steady. I don't want apologies. I want commitment. From this moment forward, Skylink will become the first U.S. airline with a zero-tolerance policy, no exceptions. No excuses for any act of bias, intentional or not. He unlocked his phone, showing a press release ready to send. Skylink Airlines announces $10 million reform initiative after chairman's personal experience with bias. He glanced at Rodriguez. This release goes live in 30 minutes, and when it does, the world will know. We made a mistake, but we chose to make it right. Rodriguez lowered his gaze, voice breaking. Mr. Johnson, I have nothing to say, but I'm sorry. Johnson placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to the next person you meet, and treat them as if they were your own chairman. In the cabin, someone began to clap, then another. The sound spread soft at first, then building like a wave. Jenkins wept openly now, but not from fear, from release. Johnson smiled faintly, turning toward the window, where the sky glowed amber and wide. Today, he said quietly, I was just a passenger. But if this test makes even one of us see differently, then Skylink has taken off again in the only way that truly matters. Johnson gently closed the leather briefcase, his hands folding together before him, eyes fixed on the two people sitting across from him. The cabin was utterly still. No whispers, no vibrating phones, only the soft amber light pooling over three faces, one powerful, one shaken, one broken. Sit down, Johnson said quietly. His tone carried no command, just an invitation. Miss Jenkins, Captain Rodriguez, we need to talk. Jenkins hesitated, shoulders trembling, eyes swollen from crying. Rodriguez followed, silent, the captain's hat still clutched tightly in his hands. They sat opposite him, separated only by a small table, just enough distance to leave nowhere to hide. Johnson began. Miss Jenkins, I want to ask you something very simple. When you first saw me sitting in seat 2 amperes, what was the first thought that came to your mind? She bit her lip, trying to speak, but no sound came. Finally, she whispered, I thought you didn't belong there. Why? Because I'd never seen someone who looked like you sitting in first class. I assumed. I thought the ticket was fake. Johnson nodded slightly, his tone calm, not accusatory. You didn't hate me. You only believed what you'd been taught, that appearance defines worth. And that, Jenkins, is exactly what this system has planted in all of us. Jenkins broke down again. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson. I didn't mean to. I know, he said softly. But you need to understand, intent doesn't erase impact. Sometimes what hurts most isn't the insult itself, but the look of doubt that comes before it. He turned to Rodriguez. And you, Captain? How long have you been flying? 23 years, Rodriguez answered, voice rough. And in those 23 years, how many times have you asked a white passenger to verify their ticket when sitting in the wrong seat? Rodriguez said nothing. Johnson didn't push, he only held his gaze, steady, unflinching, cutting through the armor of a man long accustomed to authority. Not many, Rodriguez whispered. Maybe. Never. Why? I... I didn't think about it. I was just following protocol. Johnson leaned forward slightly. No, Captain. You were following a habit. Protocol is just the story we tell ourselves to feel right. Do you know what the cruelest part of this is? Rodriguez looked up, eyes empty. Your son, Johnson said quietly, could one day be the one sitting in seat 2 amperes and see the same look in someone's eyes that I saw in yours today. Rodriguez froze. His face went pale. You know about my son? Johnson nodded gently. I know he's mixed race. I know you love him. And I want you to imagine, if someday he's treated the way I was today, what would you think? The question fell like a blade unlocking a door. Rodriguez's hands trembled. My God, I've done this for years, and never realized it. Johnson exhaled, his voice softening. No one is born cruel. We're just careless until the consequences are heavy enough to wake us. He reopened the tablet and slid it toward them. On the screen was a title. The Morrison-Martinez Protocol, a case study on bias in aviation. This, he said, is Skylink's new training material. I wrote the framework, but the content will be yours. Ours? Jenkins asked, surprised. Yes. I want you to be the ones who tell this story not from the victim's side, but from the side of those who were wrong. I want every new Skylink employee to see themselves in your eyes of remorse. Rodriguez whispered, You're giving us a chance to make amends. Johnson shook his head. No, Captain. I'm giving you a chance to understand the cost of justice. Making amends is action, but understanding the cost, that's awakening. The cabin stayed quiet. Only the hum of the engines remained, the wind brushing against the fuselage like the heartbeat of conscience itself. Jenkins looked up, her voice breaking. Mr. Johnson, do you ever get tired of having to prove yourself? He gave a faint, sad smile. Yes, but if I stop proving, those who come after me will have to start all over again. And me, I want them to fly, not fight. Rodriguez bowed his head deeply. I promise you, Mr. Johnson, I won't let my son grow up in a world like this. Johnson nodded once. Keep that promise. Not for me, for yourself. Outside the window, the night sky glimmered with the distant lights of cities below. Johnson spoke softly, almost to himself. We're flying between 2 layers of clouds, one of the past, one of the future, and only the truth will decide where this plane lands. The cabin stayed silent, but it was no longer heavy. Something had shifted. A different kind of quiet now filled the air, one born of awareness, of awakening, of people learning, at last, to see one another not as strangers, but as equals. Johnson sat in silence for several seconds. No one moved. No one spoke. Only the steady hum of the engines remained like the heartbeat of time itself, counting down to a moment of reckoning. He reopened the tablet this time, not a chart or a policy draft, but a single note of 4 short lines. He read them slowly, each word distinct, deliberate. There are 2 paths. 1. Admit and be reborn. 2. Stay silent and disappear. Choose while there's still time. Johnson looked directly at the 2 before him. Miss Jenkins, Captain Rodriguez, this is your final choice. When this plane touches down in Phoenix, the press, the legal team, and the executive board will be waiting. The first question they'll ask is simple. Will you go public, or will you resist? Jenkins clasped her hands, trembling. When you say, go public, what do you mean? Johnson nodded slightly. It means appearing on national television, facing millions, acknowledging what happened, speaking about bias, and committing yourselves as ambassadors for Skylink's anti-discrimination training program. If you refuse, he paused, then it moves into legal proceedings. No negotiation, no reinstatement. Rodriguez took a deep breath, his voice raspy. If we agree, will we be fired? No, Johnson said softly, but you'll have to live with this story, retell it, teach it. Endure the scrutiny of others until they can see real change. That's the cost of redemption. Silence enveloped the cabin once more. Outside, the muffled voice of air traffic control echoed faintly. Skylink Flight 2847, prepare for landing. Both lowered their heads, understanding that, in truth, the decision had already been made. Jenkins spoke first. I'll go public. I want my daughter to know her mother was wrong but brave enough to make it right. Her voice trembled, but her resolve was clear. Rodriguez looked at her for a long moment, then turned back to Johnson. Me too. I can't teach flight safety if I don't have the courage to face the truth. Johnson nodded, his expression softened. Good, because justice begins where fear ends. He tapped the tablet once more. Two images appeared: Jenkins and Rodriguez in their Skylink uniforms, with the words beneath, "From mistake to mission." "This will be the title of the new campaign," Johnson said. "You'll lead it not as culprits, but as witnesses." Tears streamed down Jenkins's face, but this time they carried relief. Rodriguez nodded, eyes glistening. Johnson stood, gathering his papers. "Not everyone gets the chance to make things right. Keep it. And remember, what makes the world better isn't perfection, but the courage to admit our imperfections." He walked toward the cabin door, pausing before the cockpit entrance. "We're about to land," he said, his voice low yet resonant. "When those doors open, you'll be stepping into the first chapter of a new life, not to fly for Skylink, but to fly for the truth." His gaze swept across the cabin, and the air grew still, spellbound. No one clapped. No one filmed. They simply sat in silence because they understood they were witnessing a moment when justice took the shape of forgiveness. The engines began to slow. The cabin lights shifted to a warm amber glow, reflecting off faces that were tired but resolute. "Prepare for landing," Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom, low, rough, no longer the tone of command, but of a man relearning how to be human. The aircraft shuddered softly as it touched down on the Phoenix runway. Lights flickered through the windows, flashing like the lenses of hundreds of cameras waiting outside. Beyond the security perimeter, media vans lined the tarmac, logos from NBC, CNN, Reuters, and the BBC crowding against one another. Johnson rose slowly, folding his tablet shut. His voice was calm, almost solemn. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed what the aviation industry has avoided for decades: the truth." No one replied. Many still held their phones, but none were recording anymore. They only watched, as if trying to memorize every second, every breath. When the plane came to a complete stop, the cabin door opened. A rush of hot desert air swept in, carrying the noise of the crowd, the hum of loudspeakers, and the constant burst of camera flashes. A group of officials in black suits entered first, not Skylink staff, but representatives from the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and the U.S. Department of Justice, DOJ. Leading them was Senior Inspector Torres, a small woman with sharp, unwavering eyes. "Mr. Johnson?" she asked. Johnson nodded. "Yes, I've been expecting you." Torres's gaze moved to Rodriguez and Jenkins. Standing quietly behind him, two figures who looked less like crew and more like students awaiting their turn to speak. "We've been monitoring the situation," Torres said. "This isn't just a breach of airline policy, it may constitute a violation of federal civil rights law. We'll need all original data and the full livestream archive." Johnson handed her a sealed envelope and a small hard drive. "Everything's been copied: conversation logs, identity data, and my preliminary report." Torres opened the envelope briefly. Across the top, she read, "The Skylink Flight 2847 Incident, Federal Civil Rights Case File." She looked up and gave a faint nod. "You're not just exposing something, Mr. Johnson. You're preparing for reform," Johnson replied quietly, yet firmly. "Justice doesn't require revenge, only transparency." Outside, camera lenses turned toward the open door. Jenkins stepped out first, eyes swollen, mask clenched in her hand. When the flashes erupted, she froze, then bowed her head. Rodriguez followed, his face steady but his shoulders trembling slightly. And then Johnson appeared. The nightlights caught the small silver Skylink pin on his suit jacket. For a moment, the crowd went silent. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Johnson, did you just expose your own airline?" Johnson paused midway down the stairs. His answer was brief. "No, I just helped them look in the mirror." Inspector Torres approached, lowering her voice. "You realize this will trigger a federal investigation of unprecedented scale?" Johnson nodded. "I do, but it's worth it." The wind swept across the runway, scattering papers from the reporter's hands. On a nearby LED news board, a breaking headline scrolled across the screen. "Federal Civil Rights Probe Launched After Skylink Chairman Faces Bias on His Own Flight." Rodriguez turned to Jenkins, voice rough but steady. You see, sometimes, to take off again, we have to hit the ground hard first. Overhead, the thrum of news helicopters filled the night, and under the blinding lights of the Phoenix runway, justice touched down quietly, unmistakably, and unstoppable. Inside the temporary conference room set up within Phoenix Airport, cold white light spilled over a long wooden table. The air carried the mixed scent of stale coffee and freshly printed paper, while the muffled noise of the press outside hummed like a distant storm. The mood was both solemn and fragile, the kind of stillness that exists only after a reckoning. At the head of the table sat Jenkins and Rodriguez. Before them lay two folders stamped with the silver logo, Skylink Equality Initiative. Across from them stood Johnson, no longer the accuser, but the one offering a chance at renewal. He placed two new ID cards on the table, each embossed in silver letters. Diversity Training Lead, National Program. "This is your choice," Johnson said, his voice calm but steady with warmth. "If you sign starting tomorrow, you'll lead Skylink's nationwide training on unconscious bias. Thousands of employees will learn from your story, not from theory, but from truth." Jenkins stared at the badge, tears landing softly on the cool plastic. "You still trust us, after everything?" Johnson smiled faintly. "I don't believe in perfect people. I believe in people who start again." Rodriguez bowed his head, his hand trembling as he reached for the pen. "And if I fail?" "Then you stand up," Johnson replied, "and teach what that failure cost you. Because sometimes the greatest lessons don't come from those who succeed, but from those who dared to fall and rise." Silence filled the room. Only the faint scratch of pens on paper broke it. Two signatures appeared simple, yet heavy as vows. Johnson gathered the folders, his tone low and even. "Justice doesn't end in courtrooms. It begins the moment someone says, 'I was wrong, but I will do right.'" He turned toward the glass wall. Beyond it, the first light of the Phoenix dawn spread across the runway, gilding the silent planes waiting for takeoff. "Today, Skylink didn't just land," he said softly. "It took off again from the runway of its own mistakes." Rodriguez rose and extended his hand. "Thank you, sir. I'll teach my pilots to fly with open eyes." Jenkins's voice trembled. "And I'll teach my crew to see passengers with their hearts." Johnson nodded, eyes quiet but bright. "That's enough. You no longer have to prove anything. From now on, let your actions speak." Sunlight streamed through the window, casting three long shadows across the floor. One for justice, one for remorse, and one for the enduring belief that people can, indeed, change. 3 months later, the grand auditorium of Skylink's Dallas headquarters glowed beneath stage lights. Over 600 new employees filled the seats, and on the massive LED screen behind the stage, silver letters shimmered. "The Rodriguez-Jenkins Protocol, from mistake to mission." Rodriguez stepped up to the podium. No longer in his stiff captain's uniform, he wore a simple shirt. His voice trembled slightly, but it was steady with conviction. "I once thought my job was to keep every flight safe," he began. "But that day, I realized there's nothing more dangerous than flying with prejudice, thinking it's procedure." The room was silent. He paused for a moment, then smiled. "I landed the worst flight of my life, just so I could finally learn how to fly for real." Applause rippled through the hall. Then Jenkins took the stage. Gone was the fear in her posture. Now she stood like someone who knew exactly why she was there. "I used to believe procedure was my shield," she said, "but I learned it only hides the lack of empathy. Today I don't teach customer service. I teach dignity." The audience rose to their feet. The applause this time was thunderous, not out of pity, but out of respect. From the front row, Johnson watched quietly. He didn't speak, didn't seek the spotlight. He simply looked on as two people who had once stood trembling in the cabin of Flight 2847 now stood tall before hundreds, stronger, braver, and true. After the session, a reporter approached him. "Mr. Johnson, do you ever regret the damage that incident caused Skylink?" Johnson smiled faintly. "Losing $1 billion to regain the public's trust? I'd call that the best deal in aviation history." 3 months had passed, and Skylink's internal reports told the rest. Bias-related complaints are down by 72%. Other airlines began requesting licenses for the training program. Federal officials praised Skylink as the model of corporate reform in a new era. On the wall of Skylink's headquarters, a new motto gleamed in brushed steel letters: respect over procedure, dignity over doubt. As Rodriguez passed beneath it, morning sunlight glinting on the metal, he turned to Jenkins and said softly, "That day we brought the whole airline down to the ground." Jenkins smiled, eyes warm. "But from the ground," she whispered. "It's where people learn how to truly fly." 6 months later, a quiet afternoon in Seattle. In a small cafe near the airport, a waitress set a latte down before an Asian customer just as a coworker made a mocking comment in a sing-song tone. At the next table, a white woman quietly pulled out her phone and began recording. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scold. She simply said, calm and clear, "Excuse me, but I once watched a man named Johnson teach that silence is also complicity." The coworker froze. The room fell still. Moments later, an apology came short, genuine, enough. That 42-second clip spread like wildfire, racking up over 3 million views in 24 hours. Under the comments, thousands of people wrote, "I won't stay silent either." The hashtag number respect over procedure became a nationwide movement, spreading beyond airlines to hospitals, schools, restaurants, and even government offices. Back in Phoenix, Johnson sat in his small office, warm light glinting off a wooden plaque engraved with the words, "The Dignity Documentation Project." It was Skylink's newest initiative, a platform where passengers could submit videos, letters, or voice notes about acts of kindness they witnessed in the air. Each story chosen would become official training material. On Johnson's screen, his inbox overflowed. A single mother describing the flight where the captain invited her son into the cockpit. A black veteran sharing how an airport employee publicly apologized for over-searching him. A college student writing, "I used to fear speaking up. Now I fear staying silent." Johnson leaned back in his chair and smiled faintly. He typed a short message to Rodriguez and Jenkins. "Seattle just found another voice. We're still climbing." The replies arrived almost instantly. Jenkins, "Detroit tomorrow. 400 new trainees. Still nervous, but it's worth it." Rodriguez, "My son just asked, 'Dad, who teaches people to see with their hearts now?' I told him, 'I do.'" Johnson looked out the window, where the sunset draped its gold across a plane ascending into the sky. He whispered softly, "No one is grounded forever. Not if they're willing to correct their course." 7 months after the incident on Flight 2847, the Grand Hall of Skylink headquarters blazed with light for the company's annual press conference. Behind the podium, a new emblem shimmered beneath the stage lamps. Skylink, we rise together. Johnson stepped onto the stage with no written speech in hand. The spotlight caught his face serene, unburdened, yet the quiet fire in his eyes still burned, the same one that had ignited everything months ago. Before him sat hundreds of reporters, the entire executive board, rows of employees, and two familiar faces in the front row, Jenkins and Rodriguez. Johnson began slowly, his voice deep and steady. 7 months ago, I sat in seat 2 amperes and someone asked me, 'Are you sure you belong here?' Today, that question isn't for me anymore. It's for all of us, for those who hold the future of Skylink, of justice, and of trust." The hall fell completely silent. Johnson smiled softly, resting one hand on the podium. "I've completed my mission," he continued. "Starting tomorrow, Skylink will have a new chairperson, someone who has proven that light doesn't only shine from positions of power, but from the courage to rise after falling." He gestured gently toward the side of the stage. The lights shifted, revealing Jenkins. She froze for a heartbeat as the room erupted in applause, long, thundering, rising like waves. Johnson met her at the center of the stage and handed her a silver pen, the ceremonial symbol of succession. "Miss Jenkins," he said quietly, "I once saw you break, but today, I see you standing tall. Use your mistakes to guide the next generation so they won't have to make the same ones." Her voice trembled. "Mr. Johnson, I never imagined this day would come." Johnson smiled. "I always did, because the most important thing I learned from that flight is that light was never meant to be kept. It's meant to be passed on." From the front row, Rodriguez rose first, clapping firmly. Then the entire hall followed, hundreds standing, their applause rolling through the room like a tide of renewal. Johnson stepped down from the stage, blending quietly into the crowd. On stage, Jenkins held the microphone, her hands still shaking, but her voice steady and bright. "Skylink today isn't just an airline," she said. "We are living proof that a mistake can become a beginning." At the back of the hall, Johnson looked up at the stage. The lights reflected in his eyes like a torch being passed on, no longer a story of one man, but of thousands who had learned to see one another with their hearts. Late night. The city of Phoenix shimmered beneath a sea of golden lights. In his 30th floor office, Johnson stood by the window, a cup of cold tea in hand. Below, the streets intertwined like glowing veins, orderly, quiet, yet alive. He opened his laptop and replayed the first video. Flight 2847, the moment Jenkins spoke those fateful words, and the moment he stood, not to explode in anger, but to illuminate an entire system. He paused at the 27-second mark, the frame where he asked, "Why must I prove myself?" A faint, wistful smile crossed his face. Those 6 words had since become a symbol, taught in 42 airlines, 120 universities, and hundreds of organizations across the United States. Johnson opened his inbox. A new message appeared. Subject: "Thank you for teaching me to speak up. Mr. Johnson, my name is Sarah. I'm a restaurant server in Ohio. Yesterday, I saw a coworker insult a Latino customer. I recorded it and sent it to management. They took action. I remembered what you said. Don't stay silent. Thank you for teaching me how to stand up." Johnson smiled softly and typed his reply. "Sarah, thank you for choosing what's right. Every time someone speaks up, the world becomes a little safer." Outside the window, a Skylink jet crossed the night sky, its lights blinking like a wordless salute. Johnson whispered, almost to himself, "Justice isn't born in boardrooms. It begins the moment someone dares to hit record." He turned back to his desk, switched on the camera. Soft light bathed his face as his voice began slow, steady, deliberate. "If you're watching this, remember, every change begins with a witness. When you see something wrong, don't turn away. Turn back, record it, share it. Do what your heart knows is right." The screen faded to black. Then white letters appeared. "Record the truth. Speak for the silenced. Because justice doesn't need noise, only those brave enough to stand still." A single beat of silence. Then the video replayed itself, an endless loop of the mission Johnson left behind. No one is born to change the world, but anyone can start by telling the truth. Outside, the plane vanished into the dark horizon, carrying his message forward to those ready to keep the light alive. And as another Skylink plane cut across the midnight sky, its blinking lights spelled the silent promise that Johnson had left behind. "We rise together not by power, but by conscience." The end.